I'm gonna put a disclaimer right here before the video starts. I am not a proper historian. I'm just a random guy who spends way too much time on random history facts, fueled by my schizophrenic level of ADHD. So even though I tried my best, I definitely would have gotten some infos wrong, and since I didn't want this to be a 6-hour-long video, I definitely missed some parts. Understood? Good. Now lay back, relax, and enjoy the video. Hey, my name is Finn, and today I want to talk about a country that has a special place in my heart. A country that sparked the whole rabbit hole of knowledge-consuming rampage inside me. Ein Land, das mich dazu gebracht hat, seine Sprache zu lernen und das durch mehrere Jahre leid. Today, we're gonna talk about the history of Germany. To many Americans' surprise, Germany's history isn't all about this, or the funny mustache man. It's actually much more deep and more rich than many people think. But to tell about the whole thing, I don't think I have the brain capacity to do that, so I'll just tell you the general flow of the history with some bits that you might want to know. We start out with ancient times with pre-human ancestors and some nomadic tribes, but that's kind of boring, so we'll skip past that. The first noticeable mention of the German people actually starts with the Roman Empire. As the Romans expanded their territory and started going north, they found this massive river with people living around it. As the Romans found these people who were blonde, pale, and tall as shit, the Romans called them barbarus, meaning barbarians, because as the Romans got that drip, these people are basically cavemans. And that's where Bavaria got its name. Anyways, what did the Romans do? Yo, new slaves! Which didn't really go as the Romans planned. Yes, they did make some settlements around the Rhine River, but during battles, these people were nothing like the Romans ever saw. The most famous battle being the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, where an entire Roman army got wiped by some Germanic people with some sticks. So the Romans just went, I guess we're not conquering them, they'll just be our neighbors across the river. Neighbors are an important word here, since in Old Latin, neighbors or brothers and sisters are Germani. And this is where historians say the word Germany came about. As the Romans start to call these people Germanis and the two start to coexist, this is where the German people saga really started to kick off. These people started to migrate everywhere. Before, the Romans and the Germans set up a line around the river and said, this is mine and that is yours. And the Germans basically went, I have altered the deal. Pray I don't alter any further. Historians say that the mass migration of the Germanic tribes, along with some other factors, is what led to the end of the Roman Empire. Some time passed by and the Roman Empire is now dead. And in the vacuum of power, these Germanic tribes that migrated over to Western Europe made their own little kingdoms. Namely, the Frankis and the Alemanis made the Frankish kingdom. The Bavaris made the Bavarian kingdom. And the Saxons, who migrated all the way across the sea, merged with the native Angles there, making their own little kingdoms. Nothing too important though. It's not like these kingdoms will grow and become a massive empire. For now, we only have to look at one of these kingdoms, the Frankish kingdom, which, if you can't tell by the name, becomes France. But this kingdom is a bit more than that. It started to grow, and it grew fast. And while the kingdom grew, one man arose to become the king of Franks, that being Charlemagne the Great. Charlemagne expanded the kingdom like no one did before, spreading to most of northern Italy to huge chunks of Germany, and making large amounts of duchy countries on the way, even gaining himself the title from the papacy, Emperor of all Romans. Which might confuse you because Rome is dead, but I don't feel like explaining the whole thing, so for now just think of the title as more of a Christian thing, and the Pope gives it to whoever the fuck he wants. Many historians agree that Charlemagne was the person who made the fundamentals for Western Europe. Even from his name, we could tell how much of an impact he had. Even the common names nowadays like Cheryl, Charles, Charlie, and Carl are all known to originate from his name. Anyways, since Charles is also human, he dies, and 3 of his grandsons try to take over the empire for themselves. And after some confusing conflicts and mass murders, the 3 agreed to split the lands into West Francia, Middle Francia, and East Francia. After that, the 3 went to a clusterfuck of a confusing civil war, and the map ended up looking like this. And if you look at the map closely, these countries become the fundamentals for 3 major countries in Europe: France, Italy, and Germany. Thus, to understand Germany, we'll have to look at East Francia. Now time goes by and the culture between West and East Francia became distinctly different that many didn't refer to as East Francia, but Germani, from Middle English meaning lands of the East Franks. Coincidentally, after some confusing shit and some civil war here and there, Otto, the king of Germans, immediately took the chance and got crowned as the emperor of the Romans. Which is funny because there was already a legitimate Roman emperor, that being the emperor of the Byzantines, which is kinda Rome after Rome died. So the emperor of the Byzantines went, hey, but we're the real Romans. To that, the Pope and the Germans basically replied, I have altered the deal. Pray I don't alter any further. Yep, welcome to medieval Europe. Anyways, as Kingdom of Germany led on, Frederick, or more well known as Barbarossa, came into charge. During his time, after some confusing shit and some couple failed crusades later, the Pope asked for his help. Well, the Romans in the streets are mad about the failed crusade and about to kill me, so if you help me out, I'll give you the title of Emperor of the Romans. Which Frederick replied, "Bet." Talking about the crusade, during the multiple clusterfuck known as the Crusade, spawned a small group of German knights called the Teutonic Order. They ended up going up all the way to the Baltics, Christianizing the locals, and created their own little kingdom called Prussia. A small little kingdom that we don't really have to worry about for now. Anyways, after taking care of Pope's shit, Frederick came back to the Pope and asked, "Yo, where my crown at?" But the Pope who promised Frederick the crown died, and the new Pope didn't really want to give him the title, which made Frederick kinda mad. So after getting the title from the reluctant Pope with a little bit of force, Frederick came back to the Kingdom of Germany and declared, "Boys, I kinda hate the papacy now. So from now on, we're the true Roman Empire. And to add on that, we're holy, so we can give the title of the Emperor of the Romans to ourselves." This isn't part of our deal. I have altered the... You know the gist now. With this marks the start of the long era where Germany is no longer called Germany, but the Holy Roman Empire. Even though it wasn't holy, and definitely not Roman. The phase of the Holy Roman Empire is the longest and by far the most confusing era of Germany, which I don't even want to poke at, so I'm just going to speed through it as fast as possible with only a couple things you might want to know. So the Holy Roman Empire functioned a bit weird, where it wasn't really a single entity, but accumulation of hundreds of big and small kingdoms and duchies. Just look at the map and you'll see why I don't want to explain it. Even though being in the same empire, the small kingdoms and duchies went to war with each other, and people thought of themselves not as Holy Romans, but as people of their own duchies. After some plagues and famines and 1/3 of the European population turning to dust from the Black Plague, some random guy by the name of Martin Luther came about and said, "The church is corrupt and they touch little femboys every night and genuinely all around cringe," and started massive religious reform, creating a little something called Protestantism, which the Catholics inside the empire didn't like. After some weird and confusing shit happening here and there, the Protestants ended up storming the palace where some Catholics stayed in, and did what is called a defenestration. In simpler English, that means throwing a person out of the window. And this isn't a figurative term. No, they grabbed the Catholics and quite literally threw them out of the window. And they did this 3 times. This really pissed off the Catholics, causing a religious war that lasted 30 years that involved all of Central Europe, which ended up changing nothing, except a couple million more Germans dead with some more mass purges, plagues, famines, and people turning each other into soup. So yeah, happy times in the empire. After a couple wars here and there, and a big war that lasted about 9 years that was basically the entire European continent dogpiling on France just to shit on them, because everyone hates the French, 2 major powers of the Holy Roman Empire emerged and started to slowly form a rivalry. That being Austria, which was one of the major powers in Europe, famously known for their Alabama inbreeding incest party, and Prussia, that you might remember from the kingdom that started from the small groups of knights. Our main point of attention will now shift to Prussia, the father figure of today's Germany. Prussia was a new growing power in Europe, between Russia, Austria, France, and England. Which, if you're a new surging power of Europe, it's not a good lineup to deal with, especially if you're in the literal center of them all. So Prussia had to adapt and make some grand reforms. First of all, it went through major science, art, and cultural reforms, causing the so-called Spring of Berlin, and Berlin being called Athens of the Spree River. It also went through a very strict and rigorous military reform, with literally kidnapping young Germans as their conscript method, making Prussia suddenly a very formidable military powerhouse, even against other major powers. So yeah, good stuff. Anyways, while the rivalry between Austria and Prussia grew and the struggle for dominance over the Holy Roman Empire got more and more intense, after some confusing inbred royal clusterfuck of a situation, the Austrian throne went empty. Well, sorta, it's complicated. So, in the spirit of true Europeans, everyone fucking dogpiled on it and had a weird, confusing war that lasted about another 8 years. Prussia also saw the free real estate that is now called Austria joined in and took their Austrian region called Silesia, which made the Austrians really mad, because Silesia was an economic powerhouse. So, after only a couple of years, when Britain and France started a war and everybody and their fucking mothers in Europe dogpiled on it again, Prussia and Austria started another war, which the Prussians won again. They actually shit on the Austrians pretty bad. Austria was deeply in debt, its army absolutely in shambles, and most importantly, they had to publicly recognize Prussia as a new major power in Europe. The Prussian military grew, the economy booming, the culture blooming, and the border expanding. Everything looked like it was going great for the Prussians and their dominance in the Holy Roman Empire. Until France apparently got bored and decided to go war with itself for fun, and a random short French guy with a Corsican accent came in. This video is going to be 2 hours longer if I had to explain the whole Napoleonic stuff, so I'm not gonna. But here's a general gist of what happened to the Germanic lands against Napoleon. Well, the rest of Europe actually. They got absolutely clapped. Napoleon conquered all of Europe. Well, except Britain and Russia. And thusly, the long and confusing era of the Holy Roman Empire finally came to an end. And then came the era of Napoleon, which changed Germany massively and permanently. First of all, with the Holy Roman Empire dissolved, Germany is now divided into these 3 areas. Firstly, Austria and Prussia lost their lands and became a somewhat puppet-ish state of France, and the smaller kingdoms and the duchies that supported Napoleon became a huge, disgusting blob called the Confederation of the Rhine. The rise of Napoleon changed something massive for the Germans, socially and culturally. Namely, he organized the Germanic lands from the confusing state that was the Holy Roman Empire. But more importantly, he united the German people, but not for him, but against him. You see, even though the Holy Roman Empire was a clusterfuck that no one really understood how it worked, it still lasted for almost 1,000 years, and the people living there formed a weak but apparent bond of, I fucking hate you. But we're still the same Germanic people. So when the short, ugly-looking French guy came over and dissolved their empire and started to say they're under French rule, the people didn't like that. One of the more noticeable incidents of this was the Vrchat, a Prussian-backed resistance army against Napoleon. German people, all forms of classes from all over the continent, volunteered and fight for their rights as Germans. The result? They got clapped. Actually, all of Europe got clapped pretty bad. Even though they failed to achieve success militarily, the Vrchat had a massive impact in Germany, since this was the first time in Germanic history where the German people united to fight against the French ruler, bringing out the German pride and unity of the Germanic people. To unify everyone's uniforms, they dyed their uniforms black, the easiest material to get, decorated with red stripes on their collars, and added bronze buttons, which were fairly easy to get. The color of the uniform was definitely chosen for easy productivity, but it also had a hidden meaning. With its distinct black, red, and gold coloring, it got the people's support by wanting the old Holy Roman Empire back, which is also the color of the German flag we see today, as it is the color that unified the German people for the first time in history. Anyways, while Prussia, Austria, and the rest of Europe kept in their struggle to defeat France, Napoleon decided that he had enough fun and wanted to end the French supremacy by invading Russia. Here's a pro tip if you're an emperor of a European country that's controlling all of Europe. Do not invade Russia. Napoleon went into Russia with Europe's largest army at the time with 600,000 men and made a good-looking erection, but then lost 500,000 men by either freezing or starving to death. So yeah, Napoleon's gone. And now we start the long-awaited era of our journey, the Prussian era.
Ich bin ein Preuße, kennt ihr meine Farbe? Die Fahne schmiegt mir weiß und schwarz voran, dass für die Freiheit meine Väter starben.